I'm sorry, counsel. What? It's day 13 of the Kouri Richins trial, Utah versus Kouri Richins. We may be on the state's last witness, but we left off yesterday with a bit of a cliffhanger of an evidentiary issue because the defense was getting into a line of questioning with the investigating officer, who I call IO or lead investigator or case agent or in charge but not in charge, whatever you want to call them, O'Driscoll. And the defense was getting into a line of questioning at the end of court yesterday that seemed to insinuate that maybe Eric Richins was the one sending the GIFs, the GIFs, the memes, the I'm so rich of it all. And that was an odd insinuation that immediately rendered an objection and a sidebar and then the end of the day. So what is going to happen with all of that this morning? Well, we didn't see them put anything on the record yesterday, so I imagine we'll have to see them putting that on the record today. And then we should be getting back into the rest of O'Driscoll's testimony. And then I think we will see the defense making their motion to dismiss at the end of the state's case, which is what happens at the end of the state's case on every case, unless somebody represents themselves and doesn't know they're supposed to do it. And then into the defense case, and the defense said they had multiple witnesses in the wings. So will the state rest today? Will they have a colloquy with Kouri Richins today about whether or not she will testify? Will the defense begin their witnesses that are not Kouri Richins? Or is today the day that the defense is like, yeah, first and only witness, our client, which I would be very surprised because I think they have some other witnesses and some experts and things. So what do we think is going to happen? I don't know.
There were a total of at least 10 searches by law enforcement of Ms. Richins' home. Is that right?
There were 10 search warrants issued, yeah.
And
or around 10.
You heard that there's also at least 5 multi-day searches by a private investigator. Is that right?
I don't remember if it was 5 days. He said a couple days.
And the agencies that were involved in this case were the Summit County Sheriff, right?
Correct.
The Medical Examiner's Office.
They're not a law enforcement agency.
Well, they have investigator, right? She testified here.
But they're not law enforcement.
Okay.
They're a civilian investigator.
Fair. Also, there was a private investigator that was involved in this case and communicated with you and provided information.
Because of the civil
he
case?
was involved in the civil case.
Did he provide you information?
He provided our office information. I never talked to him personally.
All right. The DEA was involved in this case, at least briefly.
They never took any official action. Well, I should restate that. They assisted us with forensic tools,
Okay.
like call detail records and things like that.
Homeland Security agent, or I'm sorry, U.S. Postal Service agent.
USPIS.
Was that one of the searches, right?
Yeah, I was aware of that.
We've heard, I believe that we're over 45 witnesses now in this trial. Is that right?
I haven't been counting.
We have,
And in all of that,
I think it is like 45 witnesses.
we have no murder weapon. Like, you haven't found anything that was connected to Eric's death. No fentanyl in the house, correct?
There was a boatload of fentanyl in his stomach that came out of the house with him.
Other than this, what's in his stomach?
Ma'am, there was no fentanyl in the house. It was all in the victim. I mean, that's one way to put it.
Did you find anything else that had fentanyl in it?
Oh, that
Okay.
you
can't say.
They got into that yesterday. Did you find anything else that had fentanyl in it? He said no.
Anything else that had fentanyl in it?
No.
Okay. You can't say how the fentanyl was administered, right?
Orally.
Besides orally.
That's all I know is that he took it orally.
We don't know exactly when it happened and what time of night or morning.
It was after
No
10 p.m.
Time range.
Before 3 a.m.
You can't say the dosage that was ingested, right? 1 pill, 2 pill, 20 pills.
Illicit fentanyl does not come in dosages.
Okay. You can't say what was ingested on Valentine's Day at all, correct?
Fentanyl is definitely ingested. Oh, I'm sorry, on Valentine's Day.
Yes, on Valentine's Day.
No, we don't have any kind of medical examiner's report of his stomach contents from that day.
And on insurance
There was an
fraud,
expert that testified about it.
We have not heard any testimony about any representations that Kouri Richins made to her insurance company, have we?
Objection, Your Honor.
State's objections are overruled. If you would restate that question, if you can, exactly. Ms.
I will.
Minister.
Which is
And
hard to
we've not
do.
heard any testimony in this case about statements or representations Kouri made to her insurance company, correct?
Not statements. We've heard evidence about it.
Okay. And with respect to the forgery count, we've not heard any testimony one way or the other whether Eric gave Kouri permission to sign his name on documents, have we?
I don't think that's required to meet the forgery statute.
Have we heard anything about that? Do you know one way or the other whether Eric allowed Kouri to sign his name on documents as a married couple?
No, but that's still signing
Forgery.
someone else's name, even if they give you permission, purporting it to be somebody else's signature.
Okay, well, the judge is going to instruct the jury on what the
Well, you're
law is
asking-
about that.
you're asking
but
him
what
about
I'm
it.
asking you is, as the investigator, do you have any knowledge one way or the other if Eric ever said to her, hey, it's okay with me, sign my name, I don't have time to deal with it?
I imagine that they have some thoughts about it, though.
I don't know.
And in fact, what we have heard is that he did give her at least one power of attorney at some point years ago, right?
Objection, well, not objection, maybe approach.
Sure.
That gets really close into the fact that it was kept out during pretrial motions. And we did hear evidence from Eric Richins' family that she might have forged that power of attorney, that it was not intended to be signed or used. We are getting very close to some of these pretrial rulings about the power of attorney being forged.
And you were here when Mr. Throckmorton, the handwriting expert, testified, and you heard him say that he could not say that Kouri Richins was who signed that document. Did you hear him say that?
I heard him say that it was probably
Not Eric.
not Eric.
But he could not say that it was signed by Kouri, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Then why are you asking if Kouri had permission to sign it? Did Kouri sign it with permission or did Kouri not sign it?
I think that's it. I appreciate your patience. Thank you, Detective. Thank you, Your Honor. We tender the witness.
Ms. Lewis, Ms. Nestor, what's the plan?
Ready to go.
Who's defense counsel's first witness?
Can we have just a minute?
Yeah.
We have
What?
a couple of options.
Understood.
You just had like a 90-minute lunch.
Your Honor, actually at this time, the defense intends to rest.
What?
Ms. Richins, may I ask you two direct questions?
Yes.
Do you understand that you have the right to testify at trial?
Yes, I do.
Are you following your attorney's advice and waiving your right to testify at trial?
Yes, I am.
I accept your waiver. I find it's knowing and voluntary.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Your Honor, the state rests its case.
Very good. Ms. Lewis.
Your Honor, after consulting with our client, the defense rests.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. So where are we at the end of the day? Well, we're not at the end of the day 13. We're at the end of evidence. The prosecution rested, and then the defense rested, and then they took a waiver from the client. Kouri waived her right to testify. And they're doing jury instructions tomorrow on day 14, and they're closing on Monday. After a bumpy few days, which in hindsight make a lot more sense, the prosecution of Kouri Richins is headed to closing arguments on Monday, March 16th. The jury was told that this case would run through March 27th. So for all the time wasted in court, for all the turbulence that was there, the jury is going to be done early. When I said this morning, well, Where we are or where we aren't, we'll just wait and see at the end of evidence. I didn't expect that that would be today. But then again, this case has been anything but expected. I think we can see some of the defense strategy in trying to double down on what they were going to get in through O'Driscoll. And you kept hearing Nestor earlier today. And again, in hindsight, everything looks a little different, doesn't it? The defense was working really hard to get in through O'Driscoll that these photos were all accessed at the same time. So these could have been sent earlier, and trying to bring those photos in around the time of the gifts to try to undercut what those gifts stand for. And I think they have argument with some of the jurors that those gifts go to the closing of the Midway Mansion. I think they can argue that with a straight face. I don't know if the jurors are going to find that that's a reasonable interpretation in the context of everything else. It's been clunky at times, but I think with O'Driscoll, you could see Nestor wading through the nuggets that they want to pull out for closing argument. And you saw that at the end of the cross. Clunky though it was, they need those things said so they can argue them in closing and try to bring them back around in closing. So does it matter how much of the jury appreciated it during the cross? Maybe, maybe not. But they are trying to pull out those moments to raise doubt as to each of those little pieces. Now, in the context, we'll see how that flies with the jury, because if the defense has already burned their trust with the jury, the prosecution holding up a puzzle and the defense trying to go and poke out pieces of the puzzle, they might be like, you didn't poke out the puzzle. You didn't poke out the pieces of the puzzle. And I think we saw some of that with the Eric and Bryce texts and with the insinuation of Eric's affair. The wife of his business partner was asked about it, and a few others. It was kind of woven in, but it wasn't asked of the tech expert. It wasn't asked of the PI, and it wasn't asked of the witnesses who had the answers to say, no, that wasn't there. But they wove those things in so that they can pull them out in closing to argue doubt. It's a good argument with, oh, those gifts go to the closing of the house. Gets a little harder with the idiots everywhere, doesn't it? Not to mention when you see the forensic accounting and then you see the I'm so rich, the forensic accounting and the I'm so rich don't really square if it's closing on the house, especially when we saw some of the text messages that the closing on the house put Kouri another like almost $3 million into debt. And then there was going to be another, what, 4 or 5 million or more to renovate it. I think the thing that undercut the renovating of Midway being the path to getting rich is that they were completely forestalled from getting permits on it. I think having the forensic accountant go through all of the notices and restrictions on the property was a really smart play by the prosecution, because Kouri's not just flipping this house and getting rich. The Army Corps of Engineers has put a full stop to anything happening on that property. But the defense is going to say, no, Eric Richins was on board. He was laying gravel. Obviously, the memes are about closing on the house. Some jurors are going to be like, why are you worried about closing on a house when your husband's literal body is downstairs covered in a sheet? So the prosecution from here is going to need to focus on that timeline. And I think that's what they'll do in closing. Eric Richins is texting, I don't feel well. I think I need to go to the hospital. Kouri's like, oh no, do you need to lay down? But her phone shows that she's with her lover. She's not heading back to the house. And then later on February 14th, Eric Richins is like, where are you? And Kouri's like, no, I'm on the way. Still down with the boyfriend. And so while there was a ton of argument, while the jury was not yet called into the courtroom this morning, you could see where the defense kept saying, I just need to get this. I just need to get this, because the defense is also working towards their closing argument. And the prosecution is going to have to remind the jury of everything that they saw from the beginning of the case and tie that timeline together. And the defense in closing needs to bring up two reasonable explanations. So the defense is in an area where they, I think, need to focus on the points that they are going to make during their closing. And if their closing is going to be, this is the sound of a wife turning into a widow, I don't think that will carry the day. I think they need to focus on the reasonable interpretations, because the strategy of the prosecution playing the jail calls with Kouri laughing about all of this and then showing the walk the dog letter, those things are not going to sit well with a jury. And the defense knows that and was trying to distance themselves from that. But I don't think that O'Driscoll was the best last witness. I think he was the necessary last witness. But it kind of ends on a fizzle for me with O'Driscoll as the last witness. Because, you know, when we're talking like more passion, more energy, that's what we got from the PI, not from O'Driscoll. From O'Driscoll, we got a bit of a beard and headlights going, yeah, no, that wasn't my part of the investigation. Yeah, no, I didn't do that. Yeah, not this. Though I think Bloodworth is a confident enough prosecutor that it will tie back around in closing, because the prosecution has been strategic. So when we're looking at the strategy, whether you are on the Emily side of the fence with, I do not like the way that this all played out, I do not like the manner of presentation of evidence from the defense, I don't think I have ever said that they don't have a strategy. I think at times I've said it is real hard to see what their strategy is. But the defense went into the case with a plan. I do not like the way that is presented. The circling back to the court's rulings again and again and again and again is hard for me. At some point, the rulings are the rulings. But the judge entertained it. And I think the judge was incredibly cautious. At times, maybe too much so. However, you're not going to get overturned on appeal by being too cautious in hearing out the defense. That is not going to cause a case to get overturned. And the state can't appeal it. So too cautious erring on the side of the defense is not going to get a case overturned on appeal. So there are times where I think the court was overly cautious in hearing the defense out and was also trying to make a record, because I don't think that the court was confident that the defense was bringing the legal arguments that gave him all of the information he needed. And we saw the court more than once say, no, that's not what was said, because the intentional shifting of words was so deeply ingrained that it was at times incredibly frustrating for me to watch. Because if I just heard you say this, don't tell me it's this. I heard it. You're not going to convince me that this is a picture of a wife turning into a widow. And I think knowing the defense strategy, because they did, opening with the prosecution's going to try to show you the picture of a witch, we're going to show you the picture of a widow, is a bold choice when question after question after question, it was the defense who was shifting the way things were stated. I think the way that the defense presented their case becomes more apparent because the prosecution team kept it so incredibly narrow. So we're going to see. I don't know if people will be split on whether or not this was a good strategic call. I think there's two parts to how I feel about the defense's strategy. One, I think it is the best legal strategy, and I think it's a solid play. Two, I was really wanting to see them call like Ronnie and Mom and Kouri and everybody else to the stand and just get messy. A good strategic play. But I think we can look back at the breadcrumbs that were left and know fairly confidently that the defense was playing for, one, not calling a case in chief, two, calling witnesses if they absolutely have to. So all that's really left is jury instructions and closing and deliberation. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the LawNerd app at lawnerd.app.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a Law Nerd.